Alright, so for my Juri players, have you ever been in this position? Just casually just playing ranked, doing whatever, and you see this? And you're mad at yourself, but you're also mad at your opponent for matching? Now, you may typically think, oh, I'll just do a light button, nothing too crazy. I'll beat him. Get a nice little 840 damage. Or maybe get potentially, heavy DP, get 1300 damage. What if I told you that there's another button you can do that potentially you may actually win in this situation? Now this button, fairly common, called this standing medium kick. Now why this button? Let me show you why. Now standing medium kick is a 5-frame 2-hitting button that has different properties depending on the hit. The first hit is 5-frame startup and is special cancel, and it can come off their light attack without the need of drive meter or anything of that some form of resources. So actually you can do something cool such as this without using any drive gauge. Now it is a little bit hard, but with practice eventually you'll be able to do it. But the second, however, is an 8-frame poke that is longer but is no longer special cancelable. So typically people think, oh, what is, it says 5 frames or has parentheses 8. That's what it means. On startup, this move naturally comes out 5 frames. But when it goes to the longer range one, it comes 8. But it won't show that in the frame meter, but typically it will show that on websites, or if you're explaining to someone, you can tell them it's 8 frames. So that's kind of like how it works. But the main point of today is the first hit. The first hit is the synergy that can create it, especially on block with standing medium punch. Now naturally, of course, they can't combo to each other. It doesn't work like that. But when it comes to frame traps, all of a sudden you may start to realize, oh wait, I can beat them out. I'm actually starting to beat them out with this. So that kind of helps out with people mashing on light attacks, which is the whole point of this video. Now this won't solve every situation, of course, since people definitely can EX reversal, backdash, walk back, jump. For example, if Terry all of a sudden just, I lose, so it doesn't really solve certain situations. However, it definitely helps out with, clipping your opponent who are mashing and just checking them, see if they stay true. Because sometimes when you're doing this as Juri, you're not sure exactly what they could be doing. And it's definitely, considering the pushback, is definitely could not be in your favor, not be in your favor, depending on what's happening. So my kind of idea with this video is to show you the options, especially with people's light attacks, and I'll actually do some voiceover explaining if she wins, trades, does weird things, because not all attacks are the same. Some people's light attacks may beat her, or they give out weird situations, or you may as well just hit them and it's pretty much in your favor no matter what. Now, there is one thing I will say about the standing mid kick is that you can actually buffer the special move, especially on block on hit. So for example, if I have him to do nothing and he just blocks us out, if you look at my inputs, notice how I did do standing medium kick, but I also buffered into core circle forward medium kick. What that kind of entails is that it's a safe buffer really when it comes to people maybe walking back or jumping. So for example, if he tries to forward jump, I still won't get it because it's the second hit and he's too far. But if I have him, let's say, I don't know, press the crouching light punch and I'm buffering, because of the special cancel, the first hit, you can now do that. So this is something I recommend doing training mode just to get the feel of it. You actually don't need to do too much about it. You don't have to set the dummy to don't block, and you kind of just mess around, go up close with them and try and do a special cancelable move. So just what is it, do the heavy Fua, do a DP, do a store, do drive rush, do any of these just to get comfortable with the idea of buffering it. And eventually you start to understand that, okay, it's kind of like an option select where if the opponent presses, I get the combo, but if they don't press, I don't get the combo. So definitely trying to mess around with this and figure out what exactly to do. Now let's, ignore all that. That's all the you know, beginning parts of it. Let's get to the meat and potatoes of this video. Okay, so here's what I did to actually set up training mode and how to figure out what beats what exactly. So here's what I did. I have the dummy set to block all, and what typically you can do as well is that you can have all their crouching light attacks and their standing light attacks. And what you do is you kind of cycle through them. So you turn one on and you kind of see what the situation is. So for example, if I have him on crouching light punch, I beat that. So stuff like that where you can try and mess around with, see what beats what. And like I said before, keep in mind some buttons may just have better hurt boxes, weird properties, etc. But I will do voiceovers explaining what the situation is and maybe other options just in case. But typically, you know, it's a buffering situation, but it's a matter of choosing an option. So here we go. Let's start off with the main man, Luke. Okay, so with Luke, typically she pretty much wins against all of his lights. Nothing too crazy. It's honestly not going to be too insane with Luke. So Luke, you definitely can have freedom when it comes to his light attacks. So feel free to mess around with each one and see which one you notice maybe the Luke player does. And you can also add in the standing punch and the standing light kick block string. So feel free to just choose whichever one you feel like is the best for you. So when it comes to Jamie, funny enough, Jamie actually has one universal option as his standing light punch. He actually does beat Juri in that sense, even without any drinks. So be mindful when it comes to Jamie, because obviously the standing light punch can lead to his target combo when he has a drink. So you definitely want to be wary of that. But other than that, pretty much the same thing. Standing punch, you can mix it up and choose which option you want to do. When it comes to Manon, kind of the same thing with Jamie. Her standing light punch actually does beat Juri, so you definitely want to be aware of that. But any of the other light buttons, she can't really beat the block string, so probably best you can do it, but don't rely on it too much. Kim is kind of the same situation. Standing light punch beats Juri, but her other buttons tend to win down. So yeah, literally just exact same situation. Just keep mindful of all of what she's doing. Against Marissa, Juri beats all of her options, so typically this comes to a matter of her special moves, such as Gladius or her stance. So just keep mindful of that, but her buttons, yeah, you pretty much cook them. So funny enough, when it comes to Lily, her standing buttons actually don't really win, but it's her crouching light kick. It's really weird. I never thought of this. This is my first time when recording this video that I realized this, but I guess maybe Lily players don't crouching light punch too much, but yeah, apparently her crouching light kick actually beats the block string. It probably is, maybe it's a hurt box or some situation, but typically it's kind of like that. Either that or the move is just really good, so keep mindful of that. When it comes to Jay Pizzleton, you know, he actually loses in all these situations. So, you know, against JP, typically what I've seen is that they'll parry, but sometimes they may hold back. But if they ever press in light buttons, yeah, you got them with this for sure. So feel free to abuse this while you can. So when it comes to Juri herself, funny enough, her standing light punch actually does beat Juri. So if you see a Juri player that maybe they're pressing too much of this block string, or maybe they're pressing too much of catching me and punch or walking forward, her standing light punch actually does win against Juri. So, you know, Juri actually does beat Juri in this situation. So DJ is a bit interesting in the point of you beat his crouching light punch, but you don't get anything off of it. So typically it's just a normal hit. But his standing light punch beats you, but you beat his his standing light kick, and I believe his crouching light kick. So you actually do beat those buttons. But typically what they do is they may sway afterwards, or they may, you know, jump forward. So be mindful of DJ players. They're one of the wild bunch. Cammy is more or less a typical kind of character where, you know, you beat her crouching light punch, you lose to her standing light punch, and her crouching light kick and standing light kick you actually beat in this. So they definitely won't be pressing those. Typically it most likely be standing light punch or crouching light punch. So just be mindful of that. Ryu's a pretty typical situation, you know, standing light punch beats her block string, but she pretty much beats all the other buttons. So Ryu is kind of just choose what option you want to do, but overall, yeah, it's pretty much just the standing light punch you got to be aware of. But that's when the light buttons actually come into play afterwards. So Honda, most of his light buttons you can beat, especially his crouching light punch and standing light punch. However, his light kick is where it gets interesting for Juri. So you actually can get, it's actually a trade, but it's actually a trade in your favor. You're actually plus 11. So in that situation, typically what you can do around that range is you can actually probably do a level 1, or even if you're feeling yourself, a level 3. So because of the block, the difference when it comes to range, you actually can do something else depending on what the range is. So feel free to experiment with that and try and figure out what you want to do as a Juri player. Blanca is typical, nothing too crazy. You actually beat all of his buttons, so you know, against his lights, it's not the worst thing ever to just press on him and just chill. So feel free to just be aware of parry, you know, maybe a reversal or anything like that. Stuff like that probably beat you out, but other than that, yeah, you beat all his buttons. Guile's pretty normal. The only thing you don't beat is his standing light punch, so you know, be mindful of that. But other than that, Guile's more or less pretty much equivalent to everyone else, so just be aware of that. Ken is pretty much normal. This seems like a Shoto thing where the light punches seem to win against Juri. So pretty much, yeah, his light punch is the one thing that's stopping you. But other than that, you know, go on ham with his light attacks. Just be mindful of the light punch. Chun-Li is a little bit weird in the sense of you actually do lose against her standing light punch, but I believe her crouching light kick, because of, I'm assuming, the way she moves, she doesn't necessarily move per se forward or anything like that. She moves slightly back, so you kind of just hit her, and it's not really a good hit. It's just more so just a poke. But other than that, you beat her all her other buttons, so feel free to experiment with that. It's just that with her, it's a little bit of a weird situation. Geef also is the same thing, as you get sometimes just a simple poke, nothing too crazy. But when it comes to his crouching buttons, you actually do get the full combo, so feel free to mess with that. But also keep in mind that this is a grappler, so he has, I believe, a 5-frame light SPD, so he could grab you out of the situation. Just be mindful of that. So most of Sims typically don't press lights in this situation, typically back off. But in the case of Sim, you pretty much beat all his light buttons except for his crouching light kick, which actually is a slide. And I believe it is simply low profiles against the button. So if you see them slide, there's probably something else you could probably mess with. Maybe a crouching light punch yourself after standing in punch, but feel free to mess with this however you please. Rashid is pretty normal, none too crazy. Light punch beats the standing medium kick. However, you beat all his other buttons. So if you see, you know, a Rashid mashing, you already know what to do. Mix in lights or mix in that standing medium kick. With Aki, it's pretty normal. Standing light punch beats her standing medium kick. However, you beat all her other buttons. So again, if you think they're gonna do something different, feel free to mix it up however you please. For Ed, standing light punch beats Juri's option. However, everything else pretty much wins. You know, I thought it wouldn't work like that considering the standing light punch doesn't have too much range, but it actually does beat it. So just be mindful of that. Akuma, again, this is pretty much a typical Shoto thing. Beats everything but standing light punch. I think this is Shoto favoritism, it's sounding like, but yeah, his light punch beats that option. Just keep mindful, you can do light attacks in between just to keep them honest. When it comes to good old Bison, again, you beat all the options, none too crazy. It's not out of the blue if you expect to see counter hit from yourself. So, you know, feel free to mess around with Bison a little bit more on his defense. When it comes to Terry, he kind of has a Shoto type thing where his standing light punch beats you, but you beat everything else of his. So, you know, treat him like it's kin. I mean, basically blonde hair. What's the difference? When it comes to Mai, she's just like the other Shotos, so standing light punch beats it. However, you can beat all her other buttons, so feel free to mess around with that, you know? Unless you want to get hit by EX fans. Elena's kind of the same situation as Bison. She's pretty much winning against all her light attacks. So if Elena's somehow mashing, please expose them. And, you know, put the beats of their heart in their ass, bro. Just mess them up. And finally with Sagat, he's kind of in the mixing up situation where his standing light punch beats you completely. However, his standing light kick actually pushes him a little bit far out, so he actually is only able to get hit by poke, not the whole special cancel the first hit. So feel free to experiment with Sagat to see which one you think you want to do and go about different ways with that. So that is all the characters' light attacks versus Juri's standing mean punch and his standing light kick block string. Hopefully this helps out any of the Juri players out there with understanding more about this button when it comes to applying pressure and how to utilize it more. I think this button actually can be quite solid and clutch at times, so I definitely recommend using it. But just be mindful of what your opponent is doing, especially in block strings and based on the info they give you. And also just mix it up, you know, do maybe a standing mean punch into crouching mean kick if they're walking back, maybe standing mean punch into do nothing. All depends on what they're doing, so just be mindful of that. But yeah, thank you guys for watching. Feel free to subscribe. I do stream on Twitch a lot, so you know, check me out there, and also follow me on socials. Till next time, spiders, take it easy.